Um, Good afternoon and welcome to today's installment of the Boost Your Skills webinar series, where we enlist the advice of specialist experts in order to help you make the most out of your university experience and to acquire the skills to help you succeed and develop both professionally and on a personal level. I'm Siddharth, and with me is Jenny, and we are your Boost Your Skills team. So this event will be in webinar format. You will not be able to turn on your cameras and mics, but we would still love to hear from you through the chat function. This is a safe space with no judgments being passed, so please feel free to ask any questions without fear or worry. If you are still anxious, feel free to message Jenny or myself anonymously, and we will pass it on. This webinar will consist of a short focus exercise, a 45-minute session, followed by some time for Q&A. So please send any questions you have into the chat box, and we'll attempt to get through all of them. The event is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel, so don't worry if you've missed anything. We will be sharing a link to the video and slides after the event. Finally, a big thank you to all our attendees who pre-submitted questions. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Maria from Sage Publishing.
Sorry, muted, Maria.
Sorry about that. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Maria. I'm marketing manager at Sage Publishing, working on our brilliant psychology and study skills books. I'm really delighted to introduce you to our author, Dr. Christian van Nieuwerburgh. Christian is an internationally renowned executive coach, professor of positive psychology at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, principal fellow of the Centre for Wellbeing Science at the University of Melbourne, and global director for Growth Coaching International, a provider of coach training and consultancy for the education sector. So needless to say, you are in very good hands and we'll get some very expert advice today. Do take this opportunity to ask your questions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So yeah, the webinar today will bring to life the tried and tested strategies from Christian's latest book, From Surviving to Thriving, co-edited with Dr. Paige Williams. From Surviving to Thriving contains the advice you need not only to do well at a university, but also to feel well while you are there. To learn more about the book and get your copy at a discounted price, just scan the QR code or head to the John Smith Student Store. That's all from me today. Now for what matters. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you so much. But everything you guys do matters a lot as well. So thank you so much, Sage and John Smith's books. It's just wonderful. And I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to just share a few thoughts. And my topic today is about flourishing students. That's what I'm really kind of excited about. And I wanted to start just by acknowledging all of you. So everyone who's joined this webinar live, I'm really appreciative. And also if you're watching a recording or you're watching the live stream, I'm really grateful that you're here, because I'll be talking about meaning a little bit later, but you know, this work is so meaningful for me. And so even editing this book with my good friend and colleague, Paige Williams, it's been a really meaningful project, and the chance to talk to you is really important for me. And in fact, when Paige and I were editing, we were thinking of you, the people who might benefit from the book. So I'm so delighted you're here. That's my Twitter name. Is it called a handle? I'm not sure. I'm pretty old. So at Christian VN. Do tweet. I'll keep an eye on the tweets that are going around. My wife and son already follow me on Twitter, but I'm looking for a few more followers, so that would be amazing. Also, please use the chat. And just to make the chat engaging, what we've thought is every time I ask you to answer or share something in the chat function, we're going to give away a prize from Sage or myself. So there'll be a little prize every time. And in terms of just focusing and grounding ourselves, one thing I just want to let us know. So my topic is From Surviving to Thriving. And that's, of course, the name of the book as well. But I just want to make a really important point at the beginning. We're not saying everybody should be thriving. I'm not suggesting that. This book has some strategies that when people are ready to move from survival mode to thriving, these are some useful strategies to use. I've been in survival mode for a big part of the pandemic as well. So I just want to reassure people, being in survival mode, it's natural and it's probably a good thing for us. You know, as human beings, we do go into survival mode when it's necessary. So please, there's no suggestion that we should all be thriving, but when you want to thrive. So it's okay not to be okay. That's why that's there. But also, if you're not okay, please reach out to someone. That would be my only request. If you're not feeling okay, reach out to someone. If you're at a university, there will be people to support you, whether you're a student or a member of staff. So it's okay to be in survival mode, but if you need help, do reach out. So grounding kind of exercise is you're investing time engaging with this. And I'm really grateful to you for that. But just so we can make sure you're going to take value from this interaction, I'd like you to put in the chat, if it's okay, the answer to this question. What would you like to take away from the hour or so that we have together? In other words, when we're done in about an hour's time, what is it that's going to make you think, I'm really glad I invested time there? So please put that into the chat, and then we'll select one person who's going to get a prize. So I'll just go quiet for a little bit as you put things in the chat. I do love the interaction. So if you're comfortable, please do put something in there. It just feels a little bit more two-way. So I'm seeing some wonderful things coming up. How to thrive. I love the and sustain it. Such an important point there. And I'll be talking a bit about that. Understanding how to thrive. Yeah, you know, Christina, as human beings, this ability to thrive, I think it's kind of inbuilt. We have the ability to thrive. So that's great. Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you're attending. Practical skills. I am going to be quite practical. I'm going to pick a few practical things, and in the Q&A as well, please ask practical questions. Now, I'll always be thinking, you guys who are watching this are probably better than me at knowing, but I will still share some of my thoughts based on, I've been a student, I teach at a university, I've studied at university, how to help students to flourish. I really appreciate that on this call, we may have people who are students wanting to think about how do we flourish. And I also very much appreciate academics or other staff in universities who are coming with that question. How do we support our students to flourish? So thank you so much. Tips that I can use. Exactly, Ian, this idea that we might, these tips aren't just for anyone. Anyone can use. Well, the book is written for students, but I just love the idea that we use them for ourselves. So lots of amazing ideas there. I'm very grateful to you. How wonderful to have so many comments. So to my colleagues, could we select the prize? Let me just check what the prize was going to be. The first prize is we're going to give away a copy of this book, From Surviving to Thriving, to one of the people who has responded to that question. So Siddharth and Jenny, can I ask you to select a person?
Okay. Do you want to say when to stop? I'm going to scroll up and down. You can say stop and I'll...
Stop.
Okay, so we've got a Jenny. I will be in touch with you. You have won a copy of the book. So
Great.
if you get a message from me within the next 2 minutes, then you have won a copy of the book.
Wonderful. Well, Jenny, I hope you enjoy the book. I hope there wasn't any favoritism there because my colleague is also called Jenny.
No, pure chance.
Okay, great. I know that. Okay, so the idea behind the book is we were curious about this question. Our question, this happened during the pandemic. Paige and I were working on this book, and we both kind of said, where has the joy gone in university? Where is the joy? of being at university. So that became the big question. And so what we decided to do was bring what we know from the field of positive psychology and share that knowledge with students. Now, the thing is, through our contacts, through our networks, through our colleagues, we had experts in each of these areas of positive psychology. And all of these experts also have experience of teaching at university. So we thought, well, let's ask them. So each of these topics is written by an expert who has experience of teaching undergraduate students. So these are the things. This is just a quick overview. Then I'm going to go in more detail. But of course, the idea of us focusing on strengths, according to research, we all have character strengths, focusing on those, taking care of yourself, such an important message, especially now. This idea of living in the moment. Of course, we can think about the future. Probably many of us are. We can reflect on what's happened in the past, but so important that we set aside time to really be in the moment and appreciate that moment. Finding meaning, so important. Being hopeful. I'm going to talk about these. Focus on what's possible. You know, really, when we're having a look around, sometimes it's going to feel like we're overwhelmed. During those times, this idea of let's put energy on something that I can change. This idea of focusing on what's possible. Being playful. I'm outside today. This isn't the background, by the way. This is a real, I'm outside on my terrace. But the idea of being playful. Play is part of the human experience. So I'll come back to that as well. Very important, invest in relationships. When in that comment, there was something about sustaining it. One way of sustaining our well-being is investing in relationships. What else? Learn about yourself. What are the things that motivate you? What are the things that irritate you? When are you at your best? Prepare for adversity because, you know, spoiler alert, life has its good moments and it has its bad moments. So preparing for adversity is important. Care about the world. Some really interesting research showing that if we actually care about the world we live in, it's good for our well-being as well. So it's not just a case of saying we need to care about the environment. It's good for us. And it makes sense. We're in the environment. We're part of the environment. And then savor your experience. I'm an executive coach. I coach people towards the middle of their careers, towards the end of the careers. The number of people who look back to their university years and say, you know, those were the best years of my life. And these are people who have lived for 50, 60 years. So these are important times. And, you know, that idea of how can we, as Siddharth said at the beginning, how can we make the most of our time at university? And I don't just mean in a kind of a measurable, I got these grades or I achieved this job, not just that, but actually how do I take advantage of all the opportunities that are available during this time? So those are the topics that are covered. Now, just another little health warning. About happiness, because I know we talk about it a lot. Do you know, interestingly, during the pandemic, the most Googled word was happiness. People were kind of thinking, how do we find happiness? It's interesting, isn't it? During the pandemic, you would think people are looking for, you know, something about vaccines. No, they were thinking about how do we find happiness? Now, I'm not going to go into it now. But if we'll put a link in the chat box, so please read the article if you're interested. But my main point is that, you know, sometimes this idea of we're pursuing happiness just makes us aware or makes us think that we're not happy. Does everybody know what I'm kind of getting at? So imagine you're searching for something. It means you haven't got it. So I'm just cautious about the idea of pursuing happiness. But the thing that is evidence-based is pursuing our well-being. And if we focus on our well-being, then we're more likely to experience moments of joy and other pleasant emotions. So that's just a little health warning that I'm not saying we should all be happy, try to be happy. I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying we should all be focusing on our well-being so that we can move from surviving to thriving. And if we do that, we're more likely to experience happiness. So a couple of, I'm only going to focus on 4 of those things that I talked about. And I've picked these 4, maybe because they're my favorites. I want to say because they're the most important now, but they are kind of my favorites. And I also want to kind of be kind of authentic with everyone here. You know, I did have a tough time during the pandemic. It was difficult for me. And I probably lent a lot on these. So isn't it interesting? While I was struggling with these things, I was actually editing a book about it. So I put these into practice for myself. And these are the 4 that were most helpful for me. And, you know, others will have other views. So the first one is connecting to meaning. And I'll explain to you why, what the research tells us. So what the research tells us is that people who are pursuing meaningful goals experience well-being even while they're pursuing those goals. So imagine your goal is to make the world a better place, or you're working for a charitable organization or an organization that does social good. While you're working towards that social good or that positive aim, you get a positive feeling all the time. It feels good while you're pursuing it. Other kinds of goals, which are more kind of extrinsic goals, kind of reward goals that you get a kind of a reward at the end. The interesting thing about that is you do get a positive feeling, but only when you've achieved the goal. And until you achieve it, you're not getting positive emotions from it. So pursuing meaningful goals is a good way of actually having a bit of a direction and also experiencing well-being as we pursue that goal. So my question to you is, and again, please use the chat function here, I'd like you to think about what is meaningful about what you do. And that's, if you're a student, you can take that to mean what you study. It can be the fact you are a student. You can see what you do more broadly than I'm just a student, you know, so whatever you take that to be. And if you're an academic or another role within the university sector, same thing. What's meaningful about your work? So please, I'd love to see a few. I'll pick out a few. Again, we're going to select one for a prize. This time the prize is a Sage mug. So it'll be a mug courtesy of Sage Publishers. By the way, I love working with Sage. I've published a few books with them. And I'm just going to be honest with everyone again. I like working with Sage because they have this idea of their work is meaningful. There's a purpose to why they are publishers. So that's why I like working with them. So let's see what's coming up in the chat. I'm just kind of going to glance through. I'm so glad to see so many people. So thank you so much for engaging. It definitely feels better for me to see lots of comments here. Esther says, know myself, know others. Absolutely. What a great starting point. You know, that idea of understanding myself so that I can relate better with others. I love that idea. Great. So that is very meaningful. Being able to teach other people, Marta says, to care about their well-being. Yeah. And, you know, I think a similar thing happens. I think there's a similar thing. I think in order to do that well, we need to look after our own well-being. So there's a beautiful synergy here. So I love that. Oh, thank you so much. Ian does work for a charity helping young people to be happier. So thank you for that really valuable work you're doing, Ian. So Ian could probably verify that doing that kind of work is rewarding in itself. It's not for the prize at the end. It's the work itself makes us feel. So, you know, as students particularly, having a clear sense of what is meaningful, and this can change. You don't have to say, I'm committed to this thing for the rest of my life. But the research would tell us that just having a sense or even taking time thinking about, you know, how does what I'm doing now fit into what's important for me or important for the world? That can be helpful for you, and it'll be definitely helpful for others. Being able to use my learning to influence my practice, Charlotte says, absolutely. The idea of reflective practice, helping students to grow. Thank you, Leonore. Having an impact on others. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. So thank you so much. Okay, so let's pick one person. Can we do the scroll thing again? But if it's Jenny again, I'm going to doubt the whole process.
Even if it's another Jenny. Okay, I'm scrolling up and down, so let me know when you want to stop.
Stop, please.
Okay, we've got a Suzanne this time. So Suzanne, I will be in touch with you very shortly.
There's a very nice Sage publisher's mug that'll be heading your way. So thank you for that. So this idea of just taking time to think about what's meaningful and then maybe setting a meaningful goal, it just needs to be meaningful to you. Don't worry about it. It just has to be a goal that's meaningful for you. And that'll probably increase your engagement and motivation. And I'm saying it's also good for your well-being. So now let me talk about joyous moments. And it's my good colleague, Robert Biswas-Diener. He wrote the chapter on this. The chapter is actually called Be Playful. So, and there is a lot of research into play in adults. You know, often we associate play and being playful with children, but there's research that play in adults is actually good for, makes them more creative. It makes it easier for people to connect with one another. So I don't know if it's a good idea for me to be recommending to university students to play more, but all I'm saying is make sure that we build moments of joy into our everyday pattern, whatever we're doing, our daily routine. And, you know, when I'm talking about moments of joy, it could be just setting aside some time to listen to some music for 10 minutes. It could be going for a walk with a friend, but things that the pure purpose of them is to experience joy. And I know when we're overwhelmed with things, we're trying to, you know, be very clever by integrating things. Oh, I can be learning and I can be, or, you know, just like even going to the movies and saying, you know what, this weekend, I'm just going to go to the movies just because I want to take some time out and experience joy. It is, there's good research to support this. And this is one of my colleagues. This is Aaron Jordan. He wrote one of the chapters. He wrote one of the chapters about, I think it's about learn about yourself. And this was us. We met in Iceland. This is a World Congress of Positive Psychology. Or it was the European Network for Positive Psychology. It's the first time we met in person. He wrote a chapter for this book. I hadn't met him, so this was my chance to show him the book. And you can see he's quite excited, Aaron Jordan. And I probably shouldn't share this, but at the conference, he and I sang, what did we sing? We sang in karaoke a Beastie Boys song. Now, most of you won't know Beastie Boys. Don't look it up. But we're both people who teach about positive psychology. And I guess for both of us, it's really important to live by those principles, you know, and so for us, work is challenging. There's a lot going on, but we do set aside time for joy. And this was one of those moments. But his face, Aaron's face, reminded me of a cartoon character. And this time the question is going to be like a quiz. Okay, so I'm going to show you a cartoon character on the screen. This time it's the first person who puts the answer into the chat box is going to win the prize. Is that okay with everyone? Everyone ready? I'm going to show you a cartoon character, and I've got that character with me as well. When I show it to you, as soon as you can, put it in the chat, and it'll just be a case of the first one that appears in the chat box will win this prize. Okay, so it's this. I've got him here. So if you recognize this character, please put the name of this character.
Wow, some very quick reactions.
Really?
Does just Rick count?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wanted specific.
Oh,
Apologies.
so Alexandra has won then. Very, very quick reactions from everyone there.
Pickle Rick. This is Rick, so apologies to Georgia. But I was looking for Pickle Rick. This is a special moment in the Rick and Morty. One of my favorite TV programs. It's probably sustained me across the pandemic years. But this is another example. Honestly, I would say I'm going to watch an episode of Rick and Morty. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. My brain's kind of overwhelmed. I'm just not going to do anything else. Not even I'm looking at notes while I'm watching. It's in the background, because I know we tend to do that. We'll think, oh, we'll put it on in the background while I'm revising. Actually, I think it's better for you and the work you do if we can actually say, no, I'm going to take 20 minutes to watch a TV episode, just completely immerse myself, and then get back to studying. And there is research to support the idea of taking breaks in that way. So congratulations. There's going to be some more Rick and Morty related commentary coming up. So I guess my summary there is, particularly in Western societies, perhaps, this idea of, look, it's all about success. It's about setting goals, meeting goals. It has some advantages, but it has some disadvantages as well. So, for me, if we could always be thinking about success and well-being, and this relates to that early comment we saw. The reason I'm talking about this is success and well-being together. If we think about those things, we're more likely to get optimal functioning. In fact, positive psychology is called the science of optimal functioning. And what we mean by optimal functioning is functioning at a high level in a way that's sustainable. There's no point functioning, at a super high level for a short period of time, then we're burnt out, we don't have any more energy. That's not sustainable. It's not good for us. So I guess that balance of how can we perform in a way that's high performance, but I can sustain it over time. I think that's a really useful habit we can get into from now. A useful habit, thinking about those two things in parallel. So I am an executive coach. I coach people. And when I just about to start the coaching, I explain to them that that's really important for me. I say, look, I am going to coach you. My role is to support you to unlock your potential. I want to support you to achieve your goals, but I'm also interested in your well-being as you strive to achieve those goals. So that idea of balancing success and well-being. So now the third thing I want to talk about is the use of our strengths. Now, positive psychology has done a lot of research, and probably one of the areas that it's done the most research is in what's called character strengths. And the idea is positive psychology, those people who launched it, I'm thinking particularly of Professor Martin Seligman and some of his colleagues, they were saying, look, for a long time, psychology has been focusing on what can go wrong with human beings, and very valuable work because we need to pay attention to that. And they were saying, but we haven't done as much research from a psychology perspective on human beings at their best. So they said, what are human strengths? Let's study human beings at their best. And so this is where the strengths research came from. So I'm going to ask you what may or may not be a difficult question. You might think, well, this is easy. You might think it's difficult, but please have a go. And in, 2 or 3 words, not a long response, just give me 2 or 3 word answer, maybe 1 word. My question to you is, what is your top strength as a person? What is your top strength? And just pop it into the chat. I'd love to see what sort of things come up. What is your top strength? Great. Oh, wonderful. I'm seeing wonderful. You see, this is already making me feel good. Tenacity, good listener, empathy, communicative, compassion, love, positiveness, kind person, working. I don't know, maybe this is self-selecting in some way. This session is all about thriving and flourishing. So maybe the group is a little bit biased, but I love to see all of these amazing strengths, empathy, hard worker. Millie, that's a really important strength during challenging times, compassion, to be resilient, yeah, to be joyful, energy, the ability to connect with energy, the not giving up, the persistence, being able to remember, being able to make lists. You can see there's a little stubbornness, Leonor, and stubbornness, you can reframe that to, persistence, persistence. And a little stubbornness, definitely a good thing. Being committed, being a cheerleader, for others, faithfulness, positivity. I just love it. So the research is interesting. So the research says actually all human beings have strengths. We all have strengths. And some of us have some strengths more than others, according to the research. But the research shows that if we know our strengths and use our strengths more in our everyday lives, it's good for our well-being. So that's interesting already. So people, and they've done this research, people who know their strengths and use them every day are more likely to report higher levels of well-being and higher levels of satisfaction with life. Now, the other thing is the strengths you've put just there, you're good at them naturally. So if you've put resilience there, of course, tap into that. You have it naturally. So now, I don't know if it was easy or difficult to come up with that list. Now, in some contexts, people find it relatively easy. There might be some cultural considerations here. Other people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know, what is my strength? The good news is there is a way to find out. And I would recommend, if you don't know and you think you know and you just want to check it out, if you go to viacharacter.org, it's a free site. You can sign up there. You answer quite a lot of questions, so apologies for that. But once you've answered the questions, they'll tell you what they think your top 5 strengths are. And my argument is that is valuable information for you because you're naturally good at those things. And the reason you're naturally good at those things is because those things are closely aligned with your values. And that's why it's called VIA character. VIA stands for values in action. There's a strong link between the strengths you've just said and what's important to you. And so that alignment for me is such an important thing. If we can become aligned, we're good at it, and it's something that's important to us. So I would recommend you have a look at that. So let's pick someone here. This is another, this is going to be the prize. I turned myself into a mug, Morty. So this would be Mug Rick. I don't think Mug Rick exists. So if you're a big Rick and Morty fan and you're saying, well, that doesn't exist. Yeah, it's just merchandise. Who knows, maybe in a future episode, but that'll be the prize. So should we find someone, Jenny? So are you scrolling?
We've got plenty of names to be scrolling through.
I really appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for all your engagement. It makes me, it makes this even more meaningful for me. So thank you. So you're scrolling. Stop, please.
Yazid. So I will be in touch. Who said memory is their top strength.
Oh,
so.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah.
great. So hopefully you'll appreciate this mug. This is probably the one that I would have wanted to win. I'd love to have that mug. I'm a big Rick and Morty fan. I think people can tell. So the summary from there is, first of all, know your strength. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging our strengths. It's not like showing off, because we all have these strengths. They're natural strengths. So I think knowing what they are, really owning it, to say, yeah, these are my strengths, and then finding ways to use those strengths more in your everyday lives. It's good for you on your well-being. You're good at it. And it's actually even good for others. Other people love to enjoy working with people who are using their strengths. So lots of advantages there. And if you go to that website, viacharacter.org, a lot of research that you can look into to understand more about that. So now we're moving into one of the last, major tool or strategy that I want to talk about, and that's about hope. And this is a kind of a personally meaningful one for me as well. So I wrote about hope. If you have amazing eyesight, it says they're published September 21, 2020. So that was really at the height of the pandemic. And again, to be very honest with everyone, I was struggling. And one of the ways I thought I could be helpful is think, what are the strategies I'm using? And let me share those. So I wrote an article explaining why I think hope is so valuable. And it was published in The Conversation. So if we can put a link in the chat for anybody who's interested, please have a look at it. These are short. It's about 600 words. So, but may be interesting. And I was arguing here that there's a psychological construct of hope, which I'm going to explain in a moment, which is different from, you know, in everyday language. Sometimes we say things like, well, I hope the weather's going to be nice tomorrow, or I hope it turns out to be. That's just wishful thinking. I'm not talking about, I wish something in the future. I'm actually talking about a psychological construct of hope, and I'm going to share that with you now in the hope that it's helpful for you. So, hope. The chapter was written by Rachel Colla, my colleague at University of Melbourne, but the theory is from Rick Snyder, who was at the University of Kansas. He's the world expert on hope. Rick Snyder. And of course, Shane Lopez, his colleague as well. These are the people who came up with the hope theory I'm going to explain to you now. So my personal belief is that we all have hope within us. You know, hope is something that exists within us. And the amazing thing about hope for me is that it can exist in even the most challenging times. And maybe that's when it's most important, that little hope. And so the question for each of us is, how do we nourish that hope within us? How do we keep that hope alive? How do we even build on it? But also, please think about how you can do this for other people, because we all have this potential of hope within us. What are the sorts of things we can do to build the hopefulness of other people? Okay, so here's the model, and it's helpful because it kind of gives us a sense of, if you're not feeling particularly hopeful, what are the things that you can actually think about to build your hope? So according to this theory, there does need to be a clear sense of a desired future. So we need to actually be able to imagine, oh, it would be amazing if this could happen, or I'd really love it if this could happen. So if you're a student, you may already have this, but I'm also thinking, just thinking ahead and saying, you know, 5 years from now, how would I like things to be? So that could be just an example of a desired future. If you're an academic or other member of staff at the university, how would you like your career to be 5 years from now? So just that looking forward, especially if things seem a little bit bleak at the moment, just kind of fast forwarding and imagining yourself 5 years from now, looking back, and what would you hope is happening 5 years from now? So that's the idea of a desired future. And I said, how can you help other people about it? You can help other people by asking them about that. And then when they're talking to you, just listening to them. That's probably one of the greatest gifts we can give to people at the moment, is taking the time to listen to them and showing them we value them. You know, this helping people feel heard and seen. And we can do that. It costs nothing apart from a bit of time. So please do that for others. Ask them, what do you hope is going to be happening in 5? Think about, what would you like to be happening? Because that thing is what draws us forward, right? So it's an essential part of hope, is being able to imagine a positive future. And remember at the beginning, I was saying, if you're not okay, please reach out to someone. If you really struggle with this part, if you're saying, look, I really can't even do that, I can't imagine that, please do reach out. There will be people in your institution who you can reach out to and talk to them. So it's essential that you're able just to think, yeah, I'd like it to be like this. Then the two parts, according to the research, one is we need so-called pathways thinking. So we have a future, We'd like to get there. We also need to be able to imagine different pathways towards it, different routes towards that future. So imagine I've said, I see myself doing a creative role, working with other like-minded people. That's my kind of desired future. I can imagine that. Then now we need to think about, well, what are the pathways? What are the different routes that would get me closer? And being able to come up with a number of different routes, that helps to build this psychological construct of hope. Now I'm hopeful. I can see, well, yeah, maybe I take this elective, or I choose this module right now, or maybe I reach out, or I try to get a placement, or I connect with somebody who's already doing that. So we start to see, oh, there are different paths. That's one part of it. The other part is this idea of agency thinking. And agency thinking is the belief that we have some influence over this, that we can play a part. It's not completely out of our hands. We need to start thinking, yeah, I can do something about it now, that belief. And what helps with that is breaking things down into small steps. This idea of coming up with small steps. I have that desired future. If I can start it, it might be, I might just spend an extra 30 minutes studying this particular subject. It might be, I go on YouTube and find out more about that. But you start to feel, I'm actually doing something. I have some control over moving closer. And honestly, the trick here is small steps. That's really my learning from years of being an executive coach, doing research into coaching psychology. The trick that I think is behind all of this, we call it incremental behavioral change. But what that means is basically coming up with small steps and convincing ourselves, you know what, I'm doing this. I'm starting to make the change that I would like to see. So those are the three components. And if we follow those three components, and you can do like a hope diagnosis for yourself. You can say, which of these is missing for me? Is it I'm not really clear about the future? In which case, take some time, find somebody to talk to. Is it that I can't see pathways? Well, start to explore them. Talk to other people who want to do something similar. People are already doing it. Or is it this agency thing? Am I doubting my own ability? In which case, start doing small steps and prove to yourself that you can do these. You think, oh, I did that first step. Now I'm more likely to try the next step. The great language that my colleague Rachel Koller used is another way of thinking about it, is this idea of way power, imagining being able to see the way, and willpower, those two things. So I said to you, this is kind of meaningful for me particularly, and I'll be wrapping up in about 5 minutes time. And what I'm going to be looking forward to is listening to your questions. So I'm really keen to do that. But if I can just tell a little story, I actually grew up in Beirut, Lebanon. And this image I showed just before, that hope, you can see it says Beirut on there. That was my, where I was born. I grew up there. I went to school there. I went to university there. And if you were to ask me, why are you so passionate about flourishing university students? Well, without my university experience, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So, I just love this idea of let's make the most of our time at university, because it just opens up so many possibilities. And, how lucky are we that we can be at university even? And so this idea of, well, it is a privilege to be able to be at university. And the question of, am I doing everything I can now to make the most of that wonderful opportunity, which of course includes enjoying it. It includes enjoying it. So yeah, this is actually a mural painted in downtown Beirut. Now, I don't know if any of you were following the news, but 4th of August, 2020, there was the biggest ever non-nuclear explosion that's ever taken place anywhere. And it happened in Beirut port. That's the port of Beirut city. And I hope some of you have been to Beirut. It's a beautiful city. But what's helpful to know is the port in Beirut is actually in the city center. It's right in the city center. So it was incredibly devastating. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced, hundreds of people killed, thousands of people injured seriously. Terrible event. And so this was on the boarding outside a building that had been completely destroyed. And imagine after that's happened, and again, Lebanon's been going through a very difficult time. No electricity, no running water, there's cholera, there's hyperinflation, there's the pandemic. It's almost like the pandemic was just one of a number of major crises that they were facing, political instability. And to see this painted, I was like, wow, if hope can exist here, right? So that's why I want to share this. And I want to continue the story because this is one photograph of a street close to Beirut port. Thousands and thousands of buildings were damaged. And there was glass everywhere, because the power of the explosion, glass shattered, it was all on the street. And one of the positive things that came out is after that explosion, everybody just came out. They brought brooms, they got together, they started gathering glass, they started cleaning what they could. You can see the damage is enormous, but at least they started trying to tidy things up. And then when I was in Lebanon, maybe a year ago, I was walking past this little shop, and there's a lady sitting outside, and she's knitting something. She's actually knitting the little Lebanese flag, and she was putting it on this little glass urn, or it's actually a drinking. In Lebanon, this is a drinking utensil. People drink out of this, and the idea behind it is you don't have to put your mouth on that. You kind of leave it so any guest can come and have water. And I saw this, and she was making a little hat for this thing so that it wouldn't, dust wouldn't get inside. And I said, oh, that's beautiful about this thing. And then she said to me, yeah, this is pretty special. It's made from the glass of that Beirut explosion. So they collected the glass, they melted it down, they made this beautiful thing out of it. And I just wanted to give you that example in terms of my reaction to everything that happened. There's something that gave me hope. I thought, well, if people can be this resilient, if people can be this creative, I thought, there's a reason to be hopeful. I could start to see a desired future. And that's in a very difficult situation. I just wanted to pick a very difficult situation to say, hope can exist in those situations. So, let's see how we can support each other to be hopeful. So the last time I'm going to ask you this, and this time we're giving away a final copy of our book, From Survive to Thrive. So if you can just, in a short phrase again, what are the things right now that give you hope? And I know there's a lot of difficult things happening at the moment, but this is why I'm asking you this question. Can you share some of the things that give you hope? And I want to share those with others as well, because I think it might give others hope as well. So please answer that question in a short phrase, if it's possible. Right. Wonderful. So thank you I really appreciate the engagement here. So these are the ones that started at around 1447, I'm guessing. Yeah. So if it's okay, I'll just pick a few things. It's lovely to see my faith in God coming up. So faith, that's something, faiths and hope are very closely connected. So lovely to see that. My late parents, thank you for saying that, very touching to hear that. Waking up every day, it sounds like it's a bit of an attitude. My children, what wonderful thing to kind of give you hope. Partners, litter of baby pigs. That's the first time I've seen that. But I guess in the sense of nature, just seeing how wonderful nature can be, beautiful. And actually, Amanda and Ruth both talk about nature. I'm here in beautiful Tenerife. One of the things I love about this, it's a Canary Island, beautiful cliffs. You can actually see them behind me. Just seeing the beauty of those cliffs sometimes. And that those cliffs, no matter what's happening, they're there. that can sometimes give me hope as well. Kindness of strangers, Lynn, I'm very interested in. I want to do more research into that, but definitely. So that example, huge explosion, it's catastrophic. And then strangers coming together to pick up glass, to try and help. And we hear that all the time alongside tragedies. There's those stories. Thank you. Yeah, the fact that there's so many people out there rooting for change, I think maybe if there's anything good that's come out of the pandemic, I think there's a desire for change, maybe an openness to think differently. So yeah, exactly. Let's see what are the things that are around us that can give us hope, because that's what motivates, that's what drives us forward. That's what allows us to bring energy and engagement. Thank you. So lots here, and please have a look down the chat as well. There's another one about random acts of kindness. Honestly, this has become almost an obsession of mine, thinking about what causes people to be kind, right? So that's one angle. It's a very human angle. And my other question is, what's the environment we need to create that encourages people to be kind? I think there's two sides to it. I think some of us have the strength of kindness, but I love the idea that we can create societies, communities, which actually encourage us to be kind rather than discourage us, right? So, well, to be really honest with you, what I'm reading here is giving me loads of hope as well. So I just love that you're doing this. And Leonore gives me a wonderful thing just to kind of wrap up with. She says, a smile. So this idea of just those little things we can do. Again, it doesn't cost anything. Giving people time, giving them a listening ear, encouraging them, reaching out, all of these things, we can actually be increasing hopefulness in others. So let's pick somebody from there, if we can, Jenny.
Okay. I'm doing the usual scrolling. So
you're wonderful at that. Thank you so much. I just want to thank Jenny and Siddharth. Thank you so much. And Maria, they've made this whole process so enjoyable for me and made me feel so at ease. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much. So, oh, sorry, you're scrolling. So stop, please, Jenny.
Okay, I apologize. I'm probably going to say this person's name wrong, but Nantharatnam. So apologies if I've ruined your name there, but I will be in touch with you very soon.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So Nantharanam is my best attempt. Great. So my last slide is also to look after yourself. So that's my request to you. In order to do all of the things we need to talk about, you do need to be well. So do please prioritize your well-being. Even if your interest is in helping others, you're going to be better at helping others if you're well-resourced. If we give all our energy away and we're kind of flat, we just don't have enough to give. So the idea of looking after yourself, it is evidence-based as well. There's a chapter on it. So that's my request to you. If you want to stay connected with me, my Twitter, @ChristianVN. I work at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. That's our Twitter hashtag at RCSI Health Plus. RCSI have a free course called The Science of Health and Happiness. So you might be interested in that. At GCI Education, we do coaching and positive psychology in educational settings. Or my own website, it's that one there, icce.uk.com. I've got some podcasts, I've got videos on there. Everything's free except books. The books you have to buy because that's the kind of the arrangement there. But everything else on the site is for free. And that's me on my motorcycle. My Instagram account is @coach-on-a-motorcycle. That's actually my back. So if you see that jacket riding around somewhere near you, you can just say hello. Or otherwise just follow me on Instagram. That tends to just be like, hey, I'm on the motorcycle or I'm traveling. The @ChristianVN is a little bit more about the work that I do. So thank you so much. I'm going to remind you that this is the book where all of these things are written. you can get a discounted price if you just scan that. But we also wanted to allow time, as we said, for some questions. So I'm going to hand over now to Jenny. If there's any questions, or Jenny and Siddharth, I'd love to. But let me say before we start, I'm a coach. I'm better at asking the questions. So don't put your expectations up about answers. That's the bit I'm not good at.
Okay, well, we can start with some questions that were pre-submitted. Could you stop sharing your screen? Would that be all right? And then everyone can see your face even better. That's perfect. So the first question that we had was, what strategies can I use for when I begin to doubt myself and my place on my course?
Yeah, you know, that little doubting voice, we've all got that. It's called the inner game. There's actually a great book called The Inner Game at Work, which might be interesting. And the idea behind the inner game, it's by Tim Galway. The idea is that in order to win in the outer game, he started by talking about tennis. He said, in tennis, there's the outer game, which is the game we can see, but also there's a game going on in the mind of each player. So both tennis players have got an inner game going on. And his argument is that we need to be, in order to win the outer game, we need to win the inner game. But we all experience moments of doubt, moments of uncertainty. Is this right? There's something called imposter syndrome as well. Again, the majority of us experience that. Am I the right person to be doing this? So one is to be kind to ourselves. If we have doubts, that's okay. I like to think that could be a little voice that's helping me. It's asking me, Christian, do you think this is the right course for you? Are you interested in this? Are you going to be able to pass this? So I like the idea that I just think of it as it's kind of helping me along. But in terms of our inner game, we can train our inner game as well. So that's the beauty of it. So I would say first thing to notice when we get self-doubt, oh yeah, there's a doubtful comment popped into my head. Notice it, acknowledge it, and then maybe think, is there anything else I might say to myself in this situation? Is there another perspective here? So I would say doubt is normal. Listen to that. But the other perspective would be, can we also get our little voice to be our champion as well? So sometimes it's our critic, right? And this is for all of us. We all have that, oh, Christian, come on, you know, you forgot that, you messed that up. But we can also have that little voice saying, go on, Christian, you can do this. You know, I had a moment of doubt just before this session because I'm outdoors. I was thinking, should I do it outdoors? Should I go indoors? And the doubting voice was saying, what if it gets too noisy? What if it's distracting? But I had a little positive voice in my head also saying, well, it's a bit more fun outdoors. It might kind of capture the spirit a bit more. So I would say notice what we're saying to ourselves and make sure what we're saying to ourselves is helpful. If it's not, think about it. And again, if some of those voices are very negative and very persistent, maybe find somebody to talk to about that. And there are lots of talking ways of helping as well. But a mild level of doubting ourselves, mild levels of being uncertain, not being sure, these are normal, and maybe embrace them.
Thank you. We have a question that's been submitted by, I'm going to get this right this time, Nantharatnam. Thank you, Mary, for telling me how to say it properly. I always like to learn new names, so that's brilliant. So if I ever meet someone with that name, I now know how to pronounce it, so that's great. So the question is, how do you continue being yourself after someone doesn't want to resolve the problem and is being rude to you?
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, there is a chapter about invest in relationships there. And one of the person who wrote it's actually a good colleague and friend of mine. It's Dr. Aneta Tunariu. And the idea of investing in relationships is, what we're really talking about is invest in positive relationships. And we kind of need to check our relationships every now and then as well. So are these positive relationships? Am I getting what I want out of them? Is the other person getting what it is I want? So I would say, let's check those relationships. Any relationships that make it difficult to be who you really are, I would say it's worth just checking, maybe challenging, asking a question. So yeah, for me, it's really important that we have relationships in which we can be very comfortable with who we are. We can be honest. We don't have to put on a particular persona. So I would recommend that we put energy there. And, you know, if there are other types of relationships and it's possible to talk about them, that would be another thing is, you know, sometimes in these relationships, I feel this way. Sometimes we can talk, sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, you know, so maybe either talk about it, and the other idea is invest in relationships that make you feel good and the other person feel good.
Great, very good answer. I have a pre-submitted question that, where is it? I have lost it, that's good. It was about sort of how, well, I suppose there's a few that lead into this, but how to thrive when your basic needs aren't being immediately satisfied is quite a good one. It covers a few different questions from people, but I think that's quite an important one.
Yeah, it is an important one, and unusually I'm going to have a clear answer here, not a vague answer. I think you cannot thrive if your basic needs aren't met. And there's, you know, in relation to all of these kind of questions about what if my basic needs aren't being met? What if I've got big personal problems at home? How do I, you know, keep them separate from my university life? These are good questions to think about, but I would say it's not possible to do that. So I would say if basic needs aren't being met, that does become the priority. And that's kind of what I was trying to say about survive to thrive. You know, to go to thriving, we have to get into surviving. We have to ensure that everyone's basic needs are met. So that's critical. So I would say in those situations, prioritize meeting your basic needs. Now, how do we keep our, you know, personal issues out of our let's say university life? It's not possible to do that. It's not possible to do that. I think as human beings, it's very difficult to say, well, that's my personal life. So yeah, I think there's something in general about right now with everything that's happening, that sometimes we're trying to manage when things aren't even manageable. So I would look at what have we got? What are we trying to do? And are there times when the best strategy is to make sure there's balance, that we can cover everything that needs to be covered? So I'm with compassion, I hope I'm thinking, make sure that you've got the resources to meet the challenges that you're facing. And, you know, this might mean, who am I to make these kind of suggestions, but there might be times when there's just too much on your plate and you have to think about which of these things needs to be paused for the moment, which of these things can wait till later. And I know there's a kind of a sense of, oh my God, I have to do everything, but just pause. It's probably better to reduce the number of things you're trying to do and do them well, and then come back to things. So that's for me the big risk when we keep talking about resilience and mental toughness and grit. Sometimes the best thing to do is to stop doing something, you know, rather than think, I started it, I have to finish it. Yes, unless it has a negative impact on your well-being, in which case I would say that's kind of my message. Prioritize your well-being, because that's with you for all of your life, your well-being. And, you know, some of the damage we do to our well-being, it can be long-lasting. So please be very careful. And I hope I'm saying this with compassion. It's because I care about everybody on this call. I'm really passionate about students flourishing. And I don't want to see students who are overwhelmed. They're trying to deal with so many personal things. They're trying to deal with very challenging academic contexts. It might be personal things as well. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, probably a time to stop, reflect, which of these things are important? Is there anything that I could pause? But I'm not the expert in this. All of you are experts. Each of us knows what we can manage. I think we can get a sense of that. For me, I think it's 7 things. There's 7 big things I can manage. If it goes into 8 or 10, I have to think something's got to, otherwise everything gets confused for me. I really need to be able to have enough space. So thank you.
That leads quite well into a second question, so I'm going to steal the spotlight from Siddharth because I saw him leaning forwards there. So sorry, you can ask yours next, Siddharth, but this one links in because we had someone that was talking about a very full routine, which is kind of what you're talking about. And so they said they have an early wake up, they do yoga and meditation, so they are giving themselves time to do something for themselves. They also have university part-time work and volunteer work that they do. And they said, I know I cannot escape life, but I truly need 30 hours a day or more to do everything I need. Which, as we can't do that, do you have any suggestions about what they can do about that?
First of all, I want to admire the zest and energy and enthusiasm of this person. So I love that. And we want to keep that. And I think the person has asked the right question of, I need 30 hours. And like you said, none of us have 30 hours. I think I kind of hinted at this before, but there is a tendency in some countries that, we're always thinking, set a new goal, add a new goal. I'm kind of interested in this, when we're overwhelmed. I've seen people suggesting we do more things. Oh, well, you now need to go and do this additional thing. You need to build this into your, and I sometimes wonder, can we do less things? And to connect to two of the ideas I suggested. One is, when you look at your schedule, so this is to that person, when this person looks at what they do, what are the things that are really important? So maybe that would be a good, what's meaningful? What are the things here that are kind of non-negotiable? I have to do these things. These are important for me. The other is to think about your natural strengths. Now, the interesting thing is, when we're doing things that are our preferred strengths, they energize us. We get energy from doing things that are our strength. When we're doing things well, but they're not our strength, it takes energy from us. So maybe looking at that as well. What are the things that are happening during the day where doing that thing actually gives you energy? In which case, probably do more of those things. And what are the things that are kind of energy draining, and trying to squeeze everything in, it can mean that we're not really enjoying each of the activities. That connects to this idea of being in the moment that I mentioned. I was, at one point in my career, I was just so busy at work. And I noticed that I was only thinking in the future. This is a true story. So, I would be going to drop my child to school. So I had to get this child to the bus to go to school. I'd be sitting in the car, taking them to the bus stop. I'm already thinking about, I need to get to work by this time. If I don't get to work, there's not going to be parking space. I wasn't in the moment. What a precious time I missed, right? So then I get to the car park. I'm walking to my office. It's the most beautiful walk. I didn't notice it. It's beautiful, leafy Warwickshire. The trees are all sorts of different. I couldn't have told you what color the tree was because I was already, I need to get into by this time, and this is my first meeting. And honestly, this is all true. I'd be sitting in the first meeting, thinking about the second meeting. And that's what can happen if we overload ourselves. We're kind of always having this sense of we haven't got enough time, I haven't got enough time. If we can slow down, I think the quality of our experience could be improved and we could get more benefit. But I don't know this person, I don't know the situation. So that person has to just look at what's important. The clear thing is, unless she's got some really special connection, she or he is not gonna get 30 hours. So it's something to think about. But just for all of us, I think, particularly the students, I think maybe every term, just a kind of a checking in, exactly this thing. What are the things I'm doing? Which are the important things? When, because maybe we can predict when are we going to be overloaded. Well, that's exam period. I know that I might not add things there. I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm the kind of person who usually adds a lot of stuff, but it's just about being aware, and making sure. I think my point is, when we're overloaded, we're probably not at our best. So if we want to be at our best, trying to manage things so that we can really savor the moments, perhaps, but I'm not an expert on this.
Thank you, Tristan. We've got one that's just been sent in as well. So I'll just read it out. It says, I am a young person who is becoming disabled and in bad health. Outwardly, I'm presenting as if all is okay, but inwardly I'm suffering. I do not know how to speak up about what is going on because I do not want to disadvantage others who are born disabled or differently abled and people who may need more support than I do. Do you have any advice for me? Well,
thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds really difficult situation. It sounds to me like reaching out to someone would probably be helpful. I think people would want to know that you're experiencing these challenges. So I think it's very thoughtful of you to think about others in this case, but this might be a situation where, like, putting your own needs and your own what's best for you first would probably be my recommendation. But this isn't my area of expertise, but I'm pretty sure that there will be people who are interested in hearing from you. So I guess my recommendation is, do reach out to someone just to have a chat, just to see what kind of support might be available, what it is that's going to be most helpful. So my recommendation is, don't hide it, or don't try and not tell people about it, would be my suggestion. But I don't know enough about the context, but that would be my overall sense.
Yes, definitely. And if you are a student, then there will be support structures at the university. And if you are able to reach out, that's probably a really good place to start, because they will be able to sort of adapt your studies and things and help you. So yeah.
I can support that, Jenny, as an academic. I teach courses. I would really want to know, especially if it's, there's no kind of other way of telling. I would really, as an academic, as somebody whose job it is to facilitate learning, if there's anything that's getting in the way, I think I would like to know. I'd feel upset if I hadn't picked it up and there was something getting in the way. So yeah, I agree, Jenny. Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to the pre-submitted questions, and we have a student who would like some advice about how to deal with ignorance. So people that are sort of racist or prejudiced, how do they continue to sort of be genuine to themselves, but also have to deal with these people?
Yeah. This idea of intolerance, something that I really find very difficult myself. It's a difficult question to answer. I do like the idea of the intention of, how do I stay true to myself, and how do I make sure that those kind of ill-informed or malicious views don't affect us, but they do. The fact is they do. So I'm wondering, what ways are there to challenge or to influence those things, because they're not acceptable. Certainly, in many of the societies we live in many of the universities we study in, those things are not acceptable. So I'm wondering, what are the safe ways of raising these issues? Again, it comes to this idea, there's so many things wrong with that scenario. But even if we look at it from a learning point of view, again, these are things that are getting in the way of people's learning. It's just not acceptable. And so I think that maybe, as a general rule, when students are finding that there's behaviors, processes, systems that are getting in the way of their learning, that they should be raised. And as we were kind of, one of the hopes that I remember seeing is there's a more of an openness to change at the moment. So and remember when I was looking down the strengths, I was saying, those little bit of stubbornness, persistence, resilience, when there's things happening that are not acceptable, they are great strengths to have, to say, look, this is not acceptable. So I think calling it out, and then finding people who are supportive as well, finding a community that you can share those experiences with. But yeah, I do feel that it's also an institutional responsibility to make sure those things are not happening.
Yes, definitely. So another question that we had was someone that was they're worried about a lot of things. So the future, not being able to talk with others in a humorous way, even that they're losing too much time by having a good sleep.
Yeah.
And they're just sort of saying, why do I lack confidence and feel so afraid?
Yeah, so I think this links to that inner game stuff. So first of all, to know that I think all of us have an inner voice, and that there are those moments of doubt. If there's too many instances of that, then it is worth seeking help to say, look, I just want to talk to somebody. Is this normal? Now, the sleep thing is an interesting one. Actually, let me share a slide, if I may, about one of the things I didn't mention today was lifestyle medicine. So there is research to, these are the pillars of lifestyle medicine. And one of the things that every person on this call can do immediately is improve your sleep. There's lots of research to support good quality sleep has a positive impact across the board. But let's just look at the other things as well. So this, again, this lifestyle medicine brings together research-informed strategies from across the field of health psychology and medicine. These are the kinds of things we could all be doing. The focus on relationships, I'd mentioned it. I didn't talk about eat healthy, but looking after our bodies is a great way to support our well-being, the being active. But improved sleep is there. So I would say, don't feel guilty about looking after yourself, as long as it's, balanced with if somebody's sleeping all day during the daytime when they should be in class, then that's problematic. But if we're talking about getting a good night's sleep, and there's practical things, sleep routines, things that I find, it's easy to say this, not so easy to do it, but a practical thing: put your don't take it into where you sleep. Mobile phone is the worst enemy to high quality sleep. And sorry, Apple, all of that, other phones, but the phones are designed to be addictive, right? So, and now they're on our arms, and they're following us all around. I love technology, and I think it makes a huge difference for us, but it does interfere with our downtime. So a small thing we can do is, maybe from 9 p.m. or whenever it is that suits you, no more iPad, no more phone, no more laptop, because actually the light of these things is designed to make us energetic. So, practical things. So I like the idea of sleep routine. So it's not necessarily, it is about the number of hours as well, but it's also about the quality of the sleep. So, don't have a good pillow. I know this sounds like minor stuff, but if we haven't had a good night's sleep, it does impact our well-being and the way we think. And when we're tired, we're more likely to get that inner game stuff I was talking about. They did research on Olympic athletes who've been training all year. When they get tired in a race or whatever it is they're doing, that's when these little doubts pop into our mind. So kind of resourcing ourselves, investing in our well-being. That's kind of why I've been saying this the whole time. Remember, I started by saying, let's not pursue happiness, because it's like, I need this, I need to do that, that's going to make me happy. my argument is invest in our well-being. Let's think about that. It's us. We're talking about, look, invest in us, invest in the things that are good for my body, invest in things that are good for my soul, if you like that way of thinking, invest in things that are good for my health, my relationships. And this has a positive impact on everything else. It actually impacts the way we think. You know, if I've had a good night's sleep and I encounter a problem, the way I deal with that is different from I've been up all night, I haven't really slept, I wake up a little bit anxious, then that other problem is going to seem much bigger to me. So I don't know if it's answered the question, but the overall message I want to get across is, let's be kind to ourselves, even if our little voice is being critical sometimes. It's okay. But how can we get it on side? How can we, because that we could think of it as a wonderful support for us. Imagine we've got a little voice that pops in, but let's work with that little voice. So the voice is telling us things that are helpful for us.
We've had a question on the chat, which I think probably, given that we've got quite a few nurses or nursing students attending, is quite an important question. So I'm going to read it word for word because it's an important one. So they've said, I'm a student nurse and my course has been so challenging, especially due to COVID, as I started 2 days before lockdown. Wow. I'm coming to the end of it, but feel so mentally and physically drained, and I want to be proud of myself for what I've achieved, especially during such a difficult situation, but I feel so drained that I'm not present in this moment. Any advice on how to improve this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to all the student nurses and all the nurses who might be listening to this, because you have done unbelievable, amazing work. So yes, you want to be proud, and you definitely should be proud, because, you know, it is unimaginable what's been asked from you. So my understanding is, even before COVID, the course is challenging. And on top of that, we all experienced a huge crisis kind of event. So again, the fact that you're feeling drained, it's not surprising. But the question, I guess, now is, what can you do to re-energize, to re-resource yourself? And sorry to bring a personal example into this, but my son also works in the National Health Service, in a very similar situation. And he started his 2 years of foundation right alongside. And, you know, on a personal note, I was just thinking, I can't believe what's being expected of him. So I think we've put unreasonable expectations on people in our healthcare services. So, yeah. I'm sorry that's been the situation, genuinely, and you know, I can say it's something definitely to be proud of, but probably what's needed is some opportunity to re-energize, to take a step back, to maybe take a bit of a break. But you know, when we're in the midst of how you're feeling now, it's very difficult to do this. So this is why the need to somehow take a bit of a break, a mind break, or some way to just take a step back. And, you know, it might be that, I'm sure you will be proud of this, but you need to get yourself into a mindset where you can actually appreciate. And there's something about acknowledging. And I think this is for everyone who's listening. I want to acknowledge, and I want you to acknowledge for yourselves, that as students during this time in general, whether it's in as a nurse or anything else, you have all been through this kind of situation. So I just want to acknowledge that. That's where the book came from. We were thinking, my gosh, what a time we're having. And I just wanted to say, well, is there something we can share? So I hope events like this and time to think would be helpful. So again, on my behalf, really grateful for what you've done and other colleagues have done. And I know it's challenging times, and it's normal that you feel drained. Finding some way to, I guess that's a good question. What things would energize me or give me resources, and somehow find a way for that to happen.
Thank you. So we have a couple more pre-submitted questions. One is someone said that they feel whenever they feel happy, they always feel suspicious that something's out of balance, and that the happy feeling won't last. It will be followed by something negative. How should they deal with that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because to some extent, I think, and this is going to be controversial, but I think they might be right. You know, that, and this happiness is a fleeting emotion, right? So there's something called time perspective. Here's another thing that people who want to know a bit more about this can look up. If you go to Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, it's called the ZTPI, Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory. According to that researcher, Professor Philip Zimbardo, we have perspective. We can have a perspective of preferring to think in the future, preferring to think in the present, and there's two ways we do that, and preferring to think in the past. We have preferences. We can change those preferences. So if you're experiencing happiness, you know, unfortunately, it's probably not going to last forever. That's my criticism of happiness, focusing on that, because life is, there's happy moments and there's unhappy moments, and being unhappy isn't a bad thing. You know, there's situations where unhappiness is the right emotion, you know, sadness is correct. But I think the thing we can try and get better at is, how do I just say, well, I'm happy now, so I'm going to enjoy it. In this moment, things are going well. I could spend time thinking about, well, what if things go wrong in the future? Or I could say, well, things are going well, I'm going to enjoy this moment right now. And then we also have things like optimism and pessimism, obviously. And optimists tend to think things are going to turn out well, and pessimists tend to think things are not going to turn out well. But there's something called optimistic explanatory style. So we can learn the way that optimists think, and that might be helpful as well. So maybe it's not about saying, don't worry, we're all going to be happy forever, because that's the bit I'm doubting. But another way of thinking about it is, in those moments where joy is abundant, let's really live in that moment. Let's make a decision to say, you know what? Anybody who's been on a holiday probably knows this. When I take on holiday, it takes me like 3 days to unwind, right? So I get to wherever I'm going, I'm unwinding. And even before I go back, I start, I need to go back. You know, so let's say I'm flying back on Monday. From Friday, I noticed that in myself. I was like, wait a minute, I'm still here. So it is a mindset shift of, actually, while I'm here, I'll worry about Monday on Sunday night. I don't need to be worrying about it now. So it might just be a perspective thing of, you know, there are going to be good moments and bad moments. And let's go into the good moments and enjoy those moments, because there are those moments. And during the bad moments, you know, Barbara Fredrickson's the big researcher on this. She did some research into broaden and build theory. And her argument is that positive emotions aren't an end in themselves, right? So being happy, experiencing joy and experiencing awe and experiencing gratitude, they're good in the moment, but they also build our resources for the future. So in a way, us in those good moments, really enjoying them, builds a buffer for us when there are going to be tough times. Does that make sense? So it's actually really an important thing to be able to say, I can really get into those positive moments. And it's going to be different for every person, so I'm not making broad recommendations, but these are a few of the ideas, and they are linked to some research that's happened. So I hope that's helpful, but each person knows themselves better than anyone. So yeah, I like it. Kind of like a firewall. Yes, a firewall of positive emotions.
We've just been sent another question, Christian. So this person says, I'm doing English and I have to read 1 book a week. To this day, I haven't read any of the 7 books we've already done, and I feel so worthless. I can't read all the books in time or find interest in them, but I love English literature. I just feel I'm not giving my degree my all, and I'm finding doing all the reading extremely challenging.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know, I studied literature. I studied English. My BA is in English at American University of Beirut. My master's is in English. My PhD is in English. So I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. And I don't know if I should say this because it's being recorded, but there were many modules where I didn't read every book. I remember a module about American literature. I just thought this isn't possible, right? But the thing that's difficult in what you're saying is that sense of worthlessness. So that's what we have to address. So, and it can be a negative spiral, right? So I can't possibly read all of these. So I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing it properly. I'm not motivated. So it can be, so I would say read one, you know, even if you can't read all of them, that's the idea of the small steps. And if the reading one book a week seems impossible, it sounds impossible to me as well. But we can read at least maybe one chapter of every book. Or so I would say start taking small steps. And I'm saying this especially because the person asking the question said they love the topic. So if you love the topic, my sense is, and I'm biased, that's the topic I did. You know, I've worked with colleagues who teach English, and one of the things we've done is actually change some of the expectations of what's read, you know, because that's a lot to read. That is a lot to read. But I guess my gut instinct, again, I don't know your situation, my gut instinct is stick with it and you know, get into a stage where you're saying, well, I'm not reading every book, but I'm reading every other book, or I'm reading 2 chapters in every book, just so that you're thinking, well, I'm getting engaged. But moving from not engaged to I'm reading every book, that's the problem. It's such a big leap. That was the idea of the small step. So try and get back into it. And you know, I've often thought teaching literature, it's really about teaching appreciation of what I think what people who teach literature want is their students to be passionate about something. So I don't think it should feel like a task. And yeah, it sounds like a lot to read, but that's all of this is my personal opinion.
It might be worth also reaching out to other students on your course, because it does sound like a lot to read, and it might be that other people are feeling exactly the same as you and just sitting there in silence. And yeah, so if you can support each other, then that would be amazing.
May I jump in? I just saw this thing, Mary's comment. When I do hard things, I link it to something I like. So let me share this as a practical strategy that I know people use, which is rewarding ourselves, you know, building in rewards. And this idea of I do one thing that I find challenging, then I do one thing I like, that's a great idea. Now, but there's a but to this, which is when you make promises to yourselves, keep them. That's probably the more important learning from this. So imagine, and I'm saying this because I've done it and it happens to me. I'll say to myself, if I get through all my work today, you know, let's say if I read 5 chapters, I'm going to take a break and go for a swim. I'm going to reward myself, right? Sometimes I do the 5 chapters and I think, oh, I'm on a roll. Yeah, maybe I'll just carry on. I would say that's a mistake, because then we start to doubt ourselves. So if you do this strategy, which I think is a great strategy, mini rewards, you know, as an academic, I get lots of emails. So sometimes I'm like, once I get through 100 emails, I'm going to give myself a reward. I think it's important that we do that. And it's about valuing ourselves as well. It's not saying, oh, well, I did 100, I might as well do another 50 now that I'm on a roll. It's a risky thing. So I love the idea of rewarding ourselves. And again, Jenny's idea of connecting with others, you know, I'm sure other students are experiencing the same thing. So collaborating, that's the idea of invest in relationships. Exactly. So this idea of reaching out, connecting with others, and maybe another thing just to watch out for. Again, it's all to do with how we each are. So if I'm the type of person who thinks anytime I experience a challenge, I'll figure it out first before I tell anybody. Now, sometimes that works really well for us, but it's important to notice that about ourselves, because sometimes it might be a good idea to say, yeah, this is really challenging and I'm going to reach out, right? So I think just this idea of get to know yourself, again, it came up, understand what are my preferences? How do I like to work? What are the things that do get me stressed? How do I prepare for that? So this idea of preparing for adversity, it is in the book as well. That's the idea of, but you have to know yourself first. So yeah, know yourself.
Thank you. I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So for now, I think that will have to be it. But I hope at some point we can have you back, Christian, because this has been really valuable and I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I've enjoyed it. And I just have to say, I'm just so, we've spent a lot of time together, and in the context when we're saying we're challenged. So one, I really appreciate everyone taking the time. And yes, definitely, Jenny, I was honest, I'm really passionate about this stuff. If there's anything I can do to be supportive, please just let me know. I want to do whatever I can. So thank you so much. And thank you for hosting and organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we said, the video will be available on our YouTube page, so you can re-watch the event, you can share it with your friends or with your students if you're an academic. Please feel free to share away. We want the message to get out to as many people as possible. So if you think anyone could do with some help, then please share. And we will be sending out information. So anything that's been shared in this event, we will send it out in an email after the event. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining in as well. It's been lovely to see the chat and everyone sort of talking to each other and sharing tips. It just makes me feel hope. That's what gives me hope.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone. And I'm going to end the webinar now, so we'll all disappear, but hopefully see you at one of our events soon.
Thank you for all the lovely comments in the chat as well. Thank you for all the thanks and appreciation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.